everybody. Thanks for joining me on Facebook. You know, over the next 7 days, we're going to talk about one of the best exercises you could ever learn and do. So that video right there, that's me doing a Turkish Get Up a little while ago. That's a 62-pound kettlebell. We're not going to talk about using the kettlebell in this video series. We're going to focus on learning some of the skills that are inside of the Turkish Get Up, as well as learning the steps associated with the Get Up. For those of you that don't know Terry, Terry, say hi.
Hi.
Say hi to everybody.
Hi to everybody.
All right, awesome. We're having a lot of fun, and we're always going to keep this kind of a thing fun, because at a time like this, man, we all need not only to exercise, but we need less stress, and we need to laugh more and have a little bit more fun in our lives. And certainly when we're learning this exercise, it is tough, it's challenging. It's going to expose every little weakness that you may have. It's a chance to learn about your body and learn where you could spend a little more time and energy. Now, this exercise challenges stability, mobility, and strength in all planes of motion. As I go through sharing some tips and suggestions and teach you this movement, I'm going to assume you're not exercising at all, or you know very little to nothing about strength and conditioning. I think there'll be some of you out there that are watching this that are thinking, I've done the TGU before, we're good. But I want to make sure everybody learns something from what we're doing here that will empower them to keep moving forward. So before we get into learning step one in this exercise, and I think today I'm going to teach you step one and step two of 7 steps total in the exercise. We'll learn the first 2 today. They go together very well. Before we do that though, Tara, let's demo the exercise and talk quickly through each step so that everybody can see what it actually looks like. What do you think? Sounds good?
Sure.
All right, down on your back we go. Now this exercise, we typically start in our side in a fetal position, but for our purposes right now, we're going to start on our back. So this is where we begin. One knee is bent with a foot flat on the floor, the other leg straight out, and the opposite arm to the leg that's straight out is going to be pointed toward the ceiling. So this is our starting position for the Turkish Get Up for our purposes. We're going to learn this exercise actually with a shoe balanced on our wrist, and I'll explain why we'll do that. But for our purposes right now, we're just going to go ahead and have you move right through this, Tara. What do you say? So our first position, we call this the press position. She's going to move in step one from the press to her elbow. So go ahead. So she comes up onto her side, onto the elbow. The next position from press to elbow is elbow to post. That's position 2. Go ahead, Tara. From this position, she's now posted on her hand. We go from post to high pelvis. That is step 3. So when you're ready, go ahead. She's pressing up into what is called high pelvis. And then the next position, position 4, is called bend. By the way, I want to throw out kudos, so go ahead and sweep into bend. You may have noticed she's been looking to her hand the entire time. That's what we want to do in this exercise until we get to the next step, which is half kneeling. So go ahead and spin around into half kneeling. At this point, she's looking forward. So you're going to be looking at your hand through those first 3 to 4 steps. All right, adjust that front leg. From half kneeling, she's going to come up into standing. What I meant to say there was, I want to throw some kudos out to Gray Cook and Brett Jones, 2 guys who taught me this exercise many years ago when I did my hardstyle kettlebell certification with Dragon Door. I mean, those 2 guys are sort of icons in the strength and conditioning field, and I learned a ton from them. Okay, we're now in a standing position. Arm is vertical, right? We're going to reverse what we just did, and you're getting the hang now of what the Get Up is. The Get Up is simply an exercise to build stability, mobility, and strength where you're going basically from lying on your back on the floor with a weight pressed overhead to standing. It's truly a get-up exercise. So we're just going to reverse the steps. We went from half kneeling to standing. Now we're going from standing to half kneeling. This is one of the trickier steps in this exercise now. She's going to pinwheel that back leg and prepare to go down into bend, hinging at the hip. And we'll talk about all that once we get to that step. The arm is still vertical. At this point, she's going to go ahead and return her gaze to her hand. All right. And then from bend, we come into high pelvis. To do that, she's going to sweep her leg. And then back down onto the floor. High pelvis to post, and then post to elbow, and then elbow down to the start position. Beautiful, Tara. Excellent. Okay, now you can stay there because I want to talk about shoulder stability for a second with everybody. Okay? There are 3 things that I want to share with you. As I mentioned earlier, this exercise, the Turkish Get Up, literally within each step of the exercise, you'll be challenged to see what you've got in terms of mobility and stability of each of the major joints in your body, your spine, naturally, the hips and the shoulder. These are the areas we're focusing on. But within each one of these steps are little movements in and of themselves, and we want to work on the details within each one of these movements so that we can basically look at the sum of all of these parts and end up with an exercise that's done well, but also really helps us to feel better and be stronger. That's the goal, right? So 3 things that I want to share with you is preparation before we get into step 1 and then step 2. The first is the shoulder joint. Actually, why don't you go ahead and stand with me and then I'll have you get back on your back. Thank you, Tara. So when we look at the shoulder, I'm going to have you spin around or spin to the side. We've got really a number of joints within the shoulder, right? The 2 that we're really going to focus on, or at least at this point, the one I want to focus on the most is the glenohumeral joint. Now what does that mean? That's the arm bone and sort of this socket, right? This sort of shape, a bone that's sort of shaped like the letter C. And what we want to do with the shoulder in this position is we want to go ahead and make sure that that arm bone is sort of securely set inside that socket. In strength and conditioning terms, we think of that as packing the shoulder, okay? Now, essentially, to pack the shoulder, what we're going to do is engage the larger muscles of the back. Let me show you what that looks like. And then if you've got a friend at home or a partner, you could try this yourself and see how it feels. One thing I want to mention, everything we're doing now is to prepare our body to do this exercise with load. This is one of those exercises that we can do naked, in other words, without any load, right? We can literally practice it with a shoe or very, very lightweight and just work through the movement elements of it. But then we can start to use heavier weights to really challenge ourselves. So that original video that you saw me doing the exercise with a 28K belt, when you start to put 50 or more pounds overhead, we want to make sure that all of these basic and fundamental elements are in place. So that's really what this is all about. Doing the preparation now so that when you start to use a heavier load, should you decide to do that, you'll really have the skills in place to be able to handle the loads progressively. So thank you. Lie back down again. Whatever side you're going to be on. All right, you're going to be on this side. This is good. All right. So follow along for me, folks, if you would, okay? I'm going to grab Terry's hand. And at this point, I'm just going to ask her to relax her shoulder and let me just pull a little bit on it, just like this. And if you look closely at her shoulder, go ahead and look close. You'll see that basically I'm sort of yanking it. It's loosey-goosey. And there's not really much stability or integration of her back and her shoulder at this point in time. And in theory, if I were to pull really hard, I could probably hurt her shoulder quite significantly, which I'm not going to do, obviously. I'm kind of tugging on the smaller muscles of the rotator cuff, the tiny little muscles that hold that arm bone in place. But here's what I'm going to ask her to do, and this is what you'll do in the Turkish Get Up as well. I'm going to say, Ter, go ahead and drop your shoulders away from your ears and pinch your shoulder blades together. And what you may have noticed as she did that is her chest lifted a little bit, her spine lengthened a little bit, and she's now creating integration through her back. Now, as she does that, you can see that as I pull, I can literally pull her up off the ground now. And she's really stable and solid. So what we've done there, thank you, can stand. What we've done there is basically create stability around the shoulder. We're protecting it by packing that arm bone right into that socket. And that will basically engage the larger muscles, the lat, the mid and upper traps, serratus, etc., the larger muscles here, and allow everything to be more stable and protected. That's what we're looking for. Okay, second thing that I want to talk about, and this is also related to the shoulder. By the way, I would advise you, if you got a partner, to just try that and also experience that feeling of engaging those muscles. That'll be really helpful for you. The second thing I want to talk about is mobility of the shoulder. One of the most challenging elements that the average person, even athletes, run into is we just don't do a lot of stuff overhead. We don't do a lot of pressing weight overhead or reaching overhead to any great degree. And this exercise requires you to keep that weight posted overhead and keep good alignment of your arm. So one of the things we like to do are controlled articular rotations of the shoulder to explore mobility and make sure that if we have a limitation, that we're working through it. So, Ter, let's go ahead and literally demonstrate this from the beginning. We're going to leave our arm at the side. We're going to lock the elbow, keep the shoulder down and packed, and then I'm just going to ask her to flex her shoulder and just bring it up as high as she can without anything else moving. No big arch of the back, no change in her body position. So what we're doing here is exploring what her end range is. And every one of you that is watching this video right now, you're going to find that you may have a limitation somewhere in that range of motion, and that's going to impact your ability to keep your arm vertical in the Turkish Get Up. To go through a full range of controlled articular rotations, you want to go ahead and do that now, Ter? She's going to turn her arm out and then come all the way around to the back. I'll leave a video for shoulder controlled articular rotations in the comments section of this post so you can actually see it. And then you finish here internally rotated, right? And then go ahead and externally rotate here, and let's work through the outermost range of motion. This is one of those things that's truly use it or lose it. If we don't work through ranges of motion of our joints, like the shoulder, like the spine, like the neck, which I'm going to talk about in a second, then we lose those ranges of motion. They go away. We don't use them, they go away. So we want to work through that range of motion. For each one of you that's watching and listening, do not move any of these joints into ranges that are painful. A tiny little bit of discomfort, that's okay. You're trying to find that in range, but nothing should be painful. Stop short of that. Decrease the range of motion, stop and pause, restart again. But be aware that you may find differences from one side to the other, and you're going to find a limitation somewhere. No question about it, right? The other thing or area that's challenged in the Turkish Get Up is the neck. So we can do controlled articular rotation for the neck. Let's run through some neck cars together. So the first thing we want to do is, again, try to stiffen everything else. Nothing else moves. just going to go ahead and lower my chin right to my chest. Then I'm going to turn my head right to the side. And then I'm going to come all the way back and rotate all the way around until my chin is down on top of my shoulder on the opposite side. And then I'm going to come back so my chin's to my chest. And you might be asking, why worry about the neck? Well, in this exercise, if you remember seeing Terry a moment ago, there are points during the exercise where you are looking at your hand and everything needs to rotate and turn, yet you're in a certain position or base of support where you are requiring your neck and your head to be able to turn. So again, this is where mobility of your spine, mobility of your neck, these areas can be challenged. Be careful, use caution, err on the side of caution, but work a little bit on that range of motion of your neck. I go through and recommend athletes go through neck controlled articular rotations every day, and the shoulder as well, the hip too. Why? Because again, if we don't use it, we lose it. Okay, the third thing I want to share with you, remember we talked about stability and packing the shoulders on the floor to create that good sort of set that arm bone right inside that socket. Then we talked about controlled articular rotations of the shoulder, and I'll leave a little video that goes into a little bit more detail about how to do that. The third thing I want to talk about is just talk a little bit about creating a little bit of core engagement. It's really, in this exercise, your core is going to be challenged three-dimensionally. But we can really start very, very simply by just saying, hey, how can we create good basic core engagement that will help us maintain a relatively neutral low back? And the way to do that is to think about contracting your low ab a little bit. Think of it as a tiny little brace, if you will. Almost imagine that if somebody was going to poke you, you might tighten a little bit. That's what we're looking for. I'm going to ask you to try to maintain that little brace as you move through the exercise. Okay, we ready to get started? Let's look at step one. All right, when you're ready. Onto your back you go. So all of these elements now come into place with this exercise. All the things that we've just talked about. So, I want to bring the shoe into play as well. By the way, this is where we have a lot of fun with this exercise because it makes it a lot harder. So what's the point of the shoe? If I'm just balancing, and I've made a fist here, and I've just got the shoe balancing on top of my fist, the only way that that shoe stays there, if I don't use glue or Velcro, is to maintain good alignment of the arm, right? And that is absolutely what we want to do. So if we lose that alignment, the shoe falls off, we start again. That makes it a lot tougher, right? So again, set up for step one. One leg is straight out, the other knee is bent, foot is flat on the floor. How wide you make your legs is up to you, but as the weight goes up and you start to challenge yourself, you're going to want to widen your base of support a little bit. But that's the idea. And then the arm opposite the leg that is extended is the one that will be straight up toward the ceiling. Now I'm going to ask Terry to go ahead and pack that shoulder. We want to keep the elbow locked out. One of the things that can happen when we engage our back is our bicep wants to do more work. So we want to make sure our shoulders are really being challenged here. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and place the shoe right there. We'll let you balance that. So this is how we begin. By the way, if you haven't recently been down on the floor in a position like this, please lower to the floor very carefully. Sometimes it's easier to start off and get down onto your side and then roll onto your back. So the bottom line is use caution and be careful, because this can be a challenging position for some folks to get down into. So the first position we're going to come up to is what Tara is going to do here. Create that little abdominal brace in the low ab. Engage your back a little bit, pack that shoulder. Keep this nice and balanced, the elbow locked out. And then from here, come up onto her left elbow. So go ahead when you're ready. This is step one. We call this press to elbow. Good. All right, good. Now, spin around for me so everybody can see this, and I'll take that. Let's look a little bit different angle at this first step, because here's where a number of things are going on. So again, we're going to come up, same side now, right? You're going to come up in this first position from press to elbow. Go ahead. So when she comes up onto her elbow, one of the things that I'm asking her to do here is to, again, create that back engagement. So go ahead and just let your shoulders just sort of collapse like you were just lying on the beach, right? Soaking in the sun. Now engage your back and lift your chest, right? That's what we're looking for. So she's pinching those shoulder blades together. As soon as she does that, she creates a really solid, stable base of support for this. Again, assuming there's weight here, right? We've got to have something which is stable and integrated. So that's step one. For this week, your first goal, beyond doing some shoulder rotations, practicing that abdominal brace to engage your core, and then working on stability of the shoulders and the back, the first goal here is just practicing this step one. So let's rep it, right? I'll give you the shoe back again. By rep it, I mean just practice lowering, raising, lowering, raising. Go ahead and give it a try, Ter. Each time you raise yourself up, you're challenging your core here to be your stable base of support. So she'll feel that, create that little brace, engage that, and then go ahead and sort of smoothly, as smooth as possible, raise herself up. Pack this shoulder here on this side, but also pinch those shoulder blades together. That's step one. Lower back down, come back up. The challenge is maintaining that vertical arm, because sometimes you'll find that the arm will want to reposition itself. Okay, we're ready now. Step two. What do you say, Tara? Step two is where we'll move from elbow to post. By post, what we mean is onto the hand on the same side. So come through that first step, press to elbow. So she's now on, as you can see, supported on her left elbow. From here, she's again engaging the low ab, keeping everything stable and strong through the back, and then go ahead and come right up onto your hand. Okay, now in this position again, maintain that engagement of your back, good alignment of the arm, position your hand as you need to. If you need to readjust, that's absolutely fine. What we don't want is to slouch or lose connection of our back. Exactly, that's not what we're looking for. Okay, those are the first two steps of the Turkish Get Up. Have fun with it. If you lose balance of the shoe, you're doing great, by the way, Tara, nice work. Just throw it back up there and try again. All right, we'll see you tomorrow with step three. Keep it fun.